Hi, I'm Sister Nancy Usselman, a daughter of St. Paul and the director of the Pauline Center for Media Studies in Los Angeles, and I'm here with you to talk about media mindful discipleship, how we can become cultural mystics. So let me ask this question. Have you ever considered how you can integrate and connect your faith with your popular media experience? I know, it's about becoming mystics. And you may be thinking, a mystic? Me? Well, think about it. Who are the mystics that you know? Do you know any mystics? We may be thinking about, the mystics that come to mind are like the Teresa of Avila's, the John of the Cross, John Paul II, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, all those great mystics of the church who had extraordinary gifts and graces. Well, yes, they are the mystics as well, but each of us can be a mystic. I used to work in our Midtown Manhattan Book Center in New York City, Pauline Books and Media, and we would have everybody and anybody walk through that center, from people from Park Avenue, Wall Street, as well as the homeless on the street. And one time this homeless gentleman came in, and he was all disheveled, and he was smelly, and he had a speech impediment. So I had to get very close to him to ask him a question. I said to him, "So what can I help you with?" And he says, "I want the 4-volume Liturgy of the Hour set in leather." And I said, like the Christian prayer, the prayer of the church, 4 volumes, all the hours. And he says, and I said, well, I'll go get the single Christian prayer, the smaller Christian prayer, just has morning and evening prayer. It's like $15. And I was even willing to give it to him. And he says, "I want the 4-volume Liturgy of the Hour set in leather." I said, well, okay, well, that's like $175. And he says, "I want the 4-volume Liturgy of the Hour set in leather." Okay, so I went to go get it and brought it over to him. And he pulls out of his pocket this disheveled little envelope. And he starts plunking down $175. I said, okay. And as he was putting the books into his backpack, I said to him, "What do you do with this? Do you know how to pray the Liturgy of the Hours?" And he says, he prays the Liturgy of the Hours with the other homeless on the streets. And then he started to share with me his relationship with Christ and the beauty he finds in his prayer experience. And as he was doing so, his eyes were literally glistening. And I was so struck by that glimmer in his eyes that when he left, I realized I met a mystic today. I met a saint who walks on the streets of New York City. Sometimes we meet people we don't realize by the externals who they are. They may be the next mystic that we're walking by. But what does it mean to be a mystic today? It has to be a transformative experience of the divine. In other words, we're so struck by love that we are no longer the same person. Have you ever fallen in love? What happens when you fall in love? Like, life seems different. It takes on a different perspective. It becomes more focused. We have a clear vision. That's what happens when we fall in love with the Lord. Life takes on a new focus. Life takes on a new clarity and a new desire to go and transform the world by our own holiness of life. It's the call to holiness. Well, my challenge to us today is not only that we are to be mystics, to have that profound and transformative experience of God, but that we're to be mystics wherever and however we find ourselves today. And for most people, we find ourselves in a digital media experience. The theologian Karl Rahner had this to say in the 1960s, before Vatican II. He would say that the Christian of tomorrow is to be a mystic or nothing at all. Well, my challenge to us today is that we're to be mystics in a popular media culture. But there's 3 elements of a popular cultural mystic. And that is that we discover the needs of humanity today. and that we find those elements of grace within the popular media culture, and that we see the sacramental, how God's grace is at work, but through the sacramental moments in the culture. So first, the needs of humanity. Blessed James Alberione, the founder of the Pauline family and who St. John Paul II called the media apostle, he would say this. He would challenge all Paulines by saying, where and toward what goal is all this humanity moving? This humanity that is constantly renewing itself on the face of the earth. It is like a great river flowing into eternity. Will it be saved or will it be lost? What are the needs of humanity today? How can we discover them? Well, let's just look at the popular media culture, the artifacts, the art and artifacts of the culture, which is in film, television, gaming, social media, music. We can discover those needs of humanity if we take a little deeper look, a sacred look, as I would call it. That means go deeper into what is being communicated. And what are the needs of humanity? Well, let's look at Parks and Rec. We can see that need for communion, the need for connection. I mean, it's fun and it's funny elements, but those people who work together, they're finding that connection and respect for one another. Let's look at those needs of humanity in like New Amsterdam, the TV show about the doctors and medical personnel who are truly seeking the betterment of humanity. It's like at the needs of humanity in like Ricky Gervais's show Afterlife. It's pretty offensive in many ways. But yet, a man who is deeply grieving the loss of his wife is looking for something to give him purpose and meaning in life. In the end, he finds it in giving of himself in love to others.
It's not all about me. And even though I'm in pain, it's worth sticking around to maybe make my little corner of the world a slightly better place.
And let's look at what are those elements of grace at work in the culture. Well, we can find it in like the movie The Way Back, Ben Affleck's story, where he is an alcoholic and searching for really someone to connect with him. Basically, basketball was always the way for him to seek his father's acceptance when he was young. And he was still seeking that sense of acceptance. And he ends up finding it in the young people he coaches. And in the, believe it or not, the priest who challenges him, who's the chaplain of the basketball team.
Oh! That's a chicken! Oh! I'm working on it. Work harder.
Challenges him to say that these kids need him. These kids need his example, his good example. And that challenges him to go forth and seek help for his alcoholism. These elements of grace are all over our culture. And even in superhero stories, there's such great stories because they're looking at that good can win out against evil. And superheroes really are human beings with these superpowers, right? But they don't take it the next level. They take it only to the point of what Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk, would call a mysticism of heroism. This mysticism is the culture loves this idea of mysticism. But it's about a transcending, seeking transcendence through our own powers and abilities. And it just remains in this world. So it's essentially a mysticism of naturalism because it cannot envision a life of hope beyond the grave. So it focuses on death rather than life. There is one superhero who takes it a step further because it's not about her saving the world.
And now I know that only love can truly save the world. So I stay. I fight and I give. For the world I know can be.
As she says, love saves the world. There's good and evil in every human person. But in the end, love conquers all. Kind of sounds like St. Paul, right? But we know there's something more. As Christians, as Catholics, we see that Christ has redeemed us. Christ has given us hope. We can also see the sacramental at work. You know, as Catholics, we love symbols and signs, right? Fire, water, oil. We all see that these represent something deeper. They have more profound understanding. And so when we look at the elements of popular culture, we see it. Like in 1917, the World War I movie is great. When you see the cherry blossoms, right? Doesn't it give you a sense of hope? The sense that there's something beyond. There's a sense of hope waiting for us. In Jojo Rabbit, the rabbit is a symbol of innocence. And this young boy during World War II who sees all Jews as evil because that's what he's been infiltrated by Nazism. And yet he meets this young Jewish girl. And then he starts to have a conversation with her. And he starts to realize that she is a human being just like him. Signs and symbols are present in our culture. If we take a sacred look, if we go deeper, if we become more media mindful, that is, if we have critical thinking, critical engagement with the culture, and we reflect on it in a much more profound way, in a theological reflection, by listening, reflecting, dialogue, and deciding and taking action with what we're experiencing, this changes us. It gives us a whole different perspective on the culture. So my call is to be cultural mystics, that is to see the needs of humanity, the elements of grace within it, and to find the sacramental. It's a call and a way to be evangelizers today. We're to be evangelizers in the popular media culture. That's what it means to live the new evangelization, to be mystics in a culture today, to bring our profound relationship with God and dialogue with the culture. Because as we communicate it, we're not putting Jesus on top of a culture, but we're entering into the culture to understand it, to transform it from within, and to propose Christ as the answer to all the needs of humanity. How can you be a mystic today? How can you be a popular cultural mystic? Sometimes we don't think of our faith as having anything to do with our entertainment lives, and yet it has everything to do with it. Our faith is a mindset, a way of life. It has to be all-encompassing, not half-hearted. It's a way of finding true, authentic, and real happiness and fulfillment in everything we are and do. Our faith must influence every aspect of our lives. Otherwise, it's just a name that we give ourselves. Oh, I'm Christian, yes. But are we? Are we really? Are we really disciples of Christ? And I would say we're disciples of Christ when we're media mindful, when we are becoming cultural mystics. Blessed James Alberione, the founder of the Pauline family, would say, "Some let themselves be dragged by the current. Others use media for edification and joy." So that's my challenge to you, that we each live our relationship with the Lord so intensely, that we live a life of prayer, that it spills out of ourselves onto the culture, onto our whole entertainment experience, and that we transform the culture from within. It's about living a media spirituality, living the media, praying for the media, praying for celebrities, praying for those who work in the media professionals. It's a spirituality for the 21st century. So I'm praying for each of us that we can be transformed by the Lord in our experience with Him in our prayer, that then goes forth and transforms the whole culture. Then we can truly be pop cultural mystics. God bless you.